Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Axiom Legacy of the Void Fan Mod Tournament. We are going into the second semi-final to determine who will go and face Impact, who just obliterated Alicia. It was kind of brutal, honestly.
Yeah, that was a one-sided affair. How are my levels? Am I okay?
You sound quieter than usual. I might have to increase your volume level from here. We just had to switch out mics, folks. Unfortunately, QXC is known for one thing in particular, which is breaking peripherals. Turns out he broke another peripheral, so there you go.
Big surprise.
Yep. People are claiming the mic is off, and I have to wonder if that's because they thought that me talking to you during the break was the mic being off, or if they're actually, I don't know.
Actually can't hear me at all. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah. So we'll just we'll wait for a second just to get things adjusted. Unfortunately, the levels on XSplit are a complete lie 100% of the time, so it's hard to determine it on the fly.
Yep. Sorry about that. It was things happen. That's all.
Yep, indeed. Yeah, it was people thinking that I was talking to them during the break when I was actually talking to you, but hey, there you go.
Right. Okay.
QX is a little loud. Okay, I've shaved a little bit off that. Let me know if that's better.
I am here. I am talking about Starcraft. Look at Starcraft. Marines, yay!
Marines, yay. That's the reaction of anyone that's a Terran player. Let's see. Okay. Everyone seems to... Yeah, apparently it seems to be fine. Okay.
Okay, cool.
Awesome. Fantastic.
Sounds
we
good.
don't have a production team, I'm afraid. There's not much we can do about it. All right. Hart versus Crank will be our next semi-final. It looks like we are about ready to go. So I'm looking forward to seeing a bit of PvT. Should be good.
Yeah, and the PvT where I think Hart has a better handle on Legacy of the Void than Ryung, based on the games that we saw.
I think so. And even if he didn't, I'd say Hart's form at the moment is probably stronger than Ryung's anyway. So one way or the other, I think, like in terms of like pure mechanical muscle, Hart has probably got the edge in this match. But in terms of strategy, Crank's going to have all the tricks. So this is going to be an interesting fight.
Yeah, and another thing to keep in mind here is that I would guess, these guys all live together, so
they do.
Hart was probably watching the games earlier. They're all hanging out. This tournament is going on. They're all enjoying it. He's like, oh, Crank plays Mass Tempest. So he's probably come up with some idea. He saw what Ryung tried. He knows that Cyclones are not going to cut it. So he can go for something a little more precise.
Yeah, and it's Habitation Station again, so we might see the Tempest strat put into play. It seems reasonable. I don't see kind of why you wouldn't. It didn't seem particularly high risk, but who knows? Maybe Hart has something a bit more aggressive up his sleeve. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, here we go to the northeast position in the Red Trunks playing Terran. We have Axiom Hart versus his opponent to the northwest position in the Blue Trunks playing Protoss. It is Axiom Crank.
Yes, and it looks like Hart is going for just Barracks Gas, probably for a fast Reaper. And meanwhile, Crank, we do see going for the Gateway double gas opening once again. So probably for some kind of early tech, possibly another Stargate.
Yeah, I would think so. Just a quick freeze there. Had to Alt-Tab. I'm just adjusting QXC's volume. Just keep me posted as to the QXC versus TotalBiscuit volume. That would be great, and I'll try and adjust it as best I can. All right. So, Hart gets double gas really fast, really quickly. So, let's see what he decides to come up with there. Cybercore in the base. Crank with a very defensive base placement here.
Yeah, you can see he's used to dealing with Reapers. No Reaper is going to be able to slip by on that left side there. Meanwhile, Hart is going to go for that fast factory, not even getting an early Reaper, in favor of getting that factory as quickly as he possibly can. Just constantly building Marines here. And I would guess from Hart we will probably see an early Cyclone.
I just don't see why you would not build an early Cyclone against Protoss. It's like a triple Stalker, really. You just throw that thing down, there's a gateway unit, it dies. And then the next one dies, and the next one dies. And the Protoss players got to be extremely careful to avoid having to engage that thing, or somehow catch it off guard, which is very hard early game, because you just don't have enough units to do that.
Yeah, the Cyclone seems incredibly strong against Protoss. They don't really, once charge finishes, you can imagine a swarm of zealots dealing with the Cyclone no problem. Once blink finishes, you can imagine stalkers blinking on top of the Cyclone. But in this early low-tech phase of the game, slow zealots are not going to catch a Cyclone. Stalkers are going to be kited by the Cyclone forever. So it's very hard to imagine how Crank is really going to defend this, especially when he's taking the gold as is natural.
Potential risk here for the Mothership Core. If it commits too much, it's going to die to the Cyclone, so he needs to watch out for that. But he's staying relatively close to the cliff edge, which is, of course, the biggest weakness of the Cyclone against flying units, so it's not going to be able to keep up there. Taking the gold, greedy move here from Crank. Stargate coming up here as well. I have to imagine that a Void Ray is not awful against a Cyclone.
I think if the Void Ray can get on top of the Cyclone, that might work, but the Cyclone is faster than the Void Ray. That is true. You can see the Marines, the Cyclone is a little bit faster than the Marines, and a Void Ray is the exact same movement speed as Marines. So the Cyclone is just a little bit faster than the Void Ray.
Yeah, alright, so this is a small little push, but a dangerous one. I mean, Crank doesn't have a lot to defend this. Yes, a Photon Overcharge will certainly help, and it's good that Hart hasn't figured out where the expansion is, but the Stalker probably is going to die pretty fast. Looks like he was able to pull back to range here, but that Mothership Core is now dead. I guess it wasn't that much use at this point anyway, but Crank's running the hell away at this point.
Hart is being very aggressive with the Cyclone here. He basically just
lost
sacrificed
everything.
it.
Yeah, that was not worth it at all. He killed the Mothership Core and nothing else. Crank has only lost one unit. That was a huge committal, and in the meantime, he gets oracled in his main base. He was completely unprepared for that. Loses a bunch of SCVs, has no defense on the ground whatsoever. The Cyclone is 20 seconds away from finishing, which is 5 more workers dead.
Yeah, unfortunately for him, the Oracle is actually out of energy now. Hart finally figures out that his opponent has taken the gold base, and now he's going to use the Cyclone to harass these probes. But if he has to pay attention, if he looks away for even a moment, the probes can surround and kill that Cyclone.
Yeah, I mean, hell, even if the Oracle comes in and has a bit of a zap, it dies. Hart is playing uncharacteristically sloppy this game, I've got to say, and Crank is taking full advantage of that.
Yeah, and it looks like that the first Cyclone didn't really do enough, did not expect his opponent to take the gold. That would have made a huge difference. He could have forced the Photon Overcharge in the main, gone to the gold, or vice versa, and now the Oracle is just continuously pushing into Hart's base and threatening probes, and he really doesn't have anything there to defend.
No, he doesn't. He's got a couple of Marines, which is nowhere near enough. Like, he is making the same mistake that Ryung did against this play, and that's not committing a Cyclone to defense. Which, as we have discovered, the Cyclone is devastating against the Oracle. It completely shuts it down. Going for early Cyclone and then not using it defensively, to me, seems very rash. And now the Tempests are out. And what answer is there to that? Well, I mean, the Cyclone gets a good salvo off on it, but it's going to die. And now I have to ask, well, what exactly is Hart going to do? Because it looks like he has completely failed his early aggression and is now falling right into Crank's 2-base Tempest build, which, as we have seen, is ludicrously good.
Yeah, and he doesn't really have the tech in place to deal with Tempest at this point. No stem,
Starport.
No +1. Yeah, Starport is just now starting. He can use the Cyclone to buffer against the Tempest, but it's not a long-term solution.
Yeah. It is getting quite late over in the Korean area, so that might have something to do with it.
Yep.
Might be a little bit tired by the looks of it. But regardless, this is not going well at all for Hart, who is losing on all fronts at the moment, and GG. Yeah, I'd say so. I'd say so. Like, that, why drag that out any further? There's no way a Terran's going to win from there. I don't, like, Crank would have to fall asleep himself, I think, for that to happen. Yeah,
the Tempests are just too strong. The Tempests are like, the way they interact with the Terran army is almost like super stalkers. If you don't have stim, or you don't have the high tech to deal with them, you just get overrun. You get kited forever. And that's basically what we saw. He went for some early aggression, didn't really transition out of it, didn't do enough damage, and then he was left in this weird low-tech position where he couldn't really fight the Tempest on any kind of cost-efficient way.
Yeah, I'd say so. It was really just a bungled attack. Like, it seems like the absolute worst position you could ever put yourself in with a Cyclone is to put yourself in an area of the map where you don't have maneuverability, where you can't move around and utilize the mobility of the Cyclone and the lock-on range. Because if you've got enough space, the Cyclone should never really die to Gateway units. But if you put yourself in the opponent's main, in the range of a Photon Overcharge, and let Stalkers kite you, then you deserve everything you get.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was... For whatever reason, he made that decision to push all the way into the main. That was not going to work. You know, the Cyclone is good, but like you said, it's good in specific situations, and when you take them out of those specific situations, it's not good.
No.
It does one thing, and it does it well, and it does a bunch of things very poorly.
Yes, and we discovered exactly what in that particular fight, and getting the gold was a lovely move. Like you said, if he had paid attention, frankly, after not seeing it expand, the first thing I would have done is gone to the gold. It's like that is exactly what Crank would do. He would take the gold. Trigger that Photon Overcharge, get the hell out of there, and as you said, kill the gold. Because there's no way Crank can stop you. You won't have the energy for a Photon Overcharge. That base is dead, and then you're ahead. But he didn't.
Yeah, there was no way Crank would have been able to defend both bases, but of course, it's just one game.
Yep.
Hart was taken off guard. He made the wrong decision, and the game's over, and Crank is now up 1-0. We're going into the second map.
Indeed, and here we go. Whirlwind, ladies and gentlemen, to the southwest position in the Red Trunks playing Terran. We have Axiom's Hart. Let's work on the decision-making a little bit there. That was a blunder. That was a gaffe, no doubt. And in the northeast position, Crank taking full advantage of that with a big cheeky play. And using just that same Tempest build, which it seems like he's been working on that one. That is not that's not a build he just came up with. I think he's been doing that a little bit, and it seems to be pretty good. There are answers to it, but the Terran keeps getting caught off guard. And once you start to really produce Tempests, you have to drop double Starport to catch up.
Yeah, it's very hard. 6-8 Tempests on the map. They harass so much, and they keep your Viking count low and your other counts low just by constantly poking in with that long-range damage. Because even one Tempest, you can just move out on the map with. You don't have to worry about it, and that's kind of unusual for Protoss. Most of the time when they get one tech unit, they're basically stuck at home using it to defend because it's not mobile enough to actually take on the map. Imagine a Protoss, they get their first Colossus, they don't walk across the map and start attacking with it.
Yeah, because if it dies, they're basically losing the game right there. They would never do such a thing. But like you said, the Tempest it's maneuverable, it's got long range, and it has significant hit points. It's got, 350? Actually, maybe more than that. It's difficult to kill, and it also has that nice ability which guarantees that it kills a unit of some sort. So it's hard not to get value out of a Tempest.
We do see Hart going for what looks to be almost the exact same build. It's a little different because he's not building a Marine before getting the Tech Lab, but you can definitely tell he's going for that early Cyclone. It's going to be SCV scouting, and I think he's going to be a little unhappy seeing his opponent went Nexus first. But depending on how quickly that Cyclone gets there, he may have an overcharge in time. And if he does have an overcharge, that should be enough to deflect that Cyclone.
Yeah. The question is, will we see Hart make the right moves and attack the right place? Can he force an overcharge and then get in somewhere else and do something with it? Because that Mothership Core, once a Cyclone is on the board, that Mothership Core might as well be dead. We are seeing a little bit of a change up here from Hart. He's going to actually open up with a Herc and a Cyclone.
Yeah, this is unusual. I did not expect him to go both Hercs and Cyclones. And I'm not really sure what the intention is. I guess he's just trying to make a lot of brute force for the to kind of break through the front, whether it's attacking the Nexus before overcharge is done or pushing through into the main. But that's going to be the strategy. So first Herc is on the way. He now knows it's Nexus first, and the Cyclone will be rallied close behind it. You can see Crank is holding the middle watchtower, and that allows him to get a little more of an idea of what's coming. He sees the Herc. He knows there was a factory with a tech lab, so he basically knows it's going to be Herc Cyclone. Which
is gateway killer, as far as I'm concerned. And it looks like the response is going to be Robo. Could be Immortal. I think Immortal would be a grand response to this. But the question, he can't get out in time, though. Like, Gateway's not going to be enough. He's going to have to rely on Photon Overcharge to try and deflect this. As we saw, Zealots go down very quickly to this. Stalker can handle it, and I'm actually surprised that Hart's kind of going in so early here. As you mentioned, the Hurt can't be repaired in the same way that a Hellbat could be. The always trying to kill the Mothership Core, but he's not going to get it. And, yes, he is going to get it. No Photon Overcharge.
Yep. And that's going to make a big difference in Crank's ability to defend the next wave of this. There's another Cyclone and another Herc coming across the map. But the really key part for Crank is going to be holding the top of the ramp. Because, of course, the Cyclone's main power is in kiting and attacking from long range. If he doesn't have vision at the top of the ramp, he can't make that happen.
Can't lock on. Yeah. That's a possibility. Will Crank be able to fend this off? He does have an SCV there to repair the Cyclone. And the Herc can jump in and get vision very fast, which is kind of a bit surprised that he sent the Cyclone first. He almost lost it there. Yep. But he was able to kill that. Another Mothership Core has come out, which is... oh, wow. This is not going well, honestly. This looks like a pretty cool aggressive move, but Crank's got this locked down. He didn't even have to use Photon Overcharge to deflect that.
Yeah, and you can see Hart is in a pretty bad position at this point in terms of workers. He's down about 11. You know, Crank has a full mining 2 bases. Basically, he's only a couple probes short of having absolute optimal saturation, and he's now putting down a 3rd Nexus. Hart hasn't even really established his natural base here, so very, very difficult spot for Hart to be in.
Yeah, I'd say so. This is very difficult indeed. And the initial pokes, they sound good on paper, but it turns out you can micro around that. It's so strange when you think about it, isn't it? It's like, oh wow, he's got Herc, he's got Cyclone, he can just murder gateway units, and then suddenly it's like, hang on a minute, he didn't lose anything. They all kind of died, and Crank just out-microed him. It's that simple.
Yeah, a little bit of micro, a little bit of just... You know, it takes a lot of time to get across the map, especially on Whirlwind.
Yeah, it does.
And he committed a lot of resources to what was perhaps not the most cost-efficient way. Like, the Herc didn't really seem that special, and he wasn't really able to take full advantage of the Cyclone in, you know, harassing the units and staying at range, partly because of that cliff, the ramp at his natural, and partly because he just was kind of going all out with it when that's not really what the Cyclone is good for.
And the Herc seems to be something that kind of forces your opponent to micro against it, but the micro's not that difficult, especially if you're used to microing Stalkers anyway, and you're going to have to micro them against the Cyclone. The Herc basically grapples in, gets maybe 1, maximum 2 shots off, and then doesn't touch anything else, in theory, and then just gets kited around like an idiot. So against a Zealot-heavy force, or if you can jump on top of the Sentry, we saw Ryung use Hercs effectively in later game, but I don't buy their effectiveness in early game PvT quite as much, frankly, unless your opponent's gone quite Zealot heavy.
It's hard to imagine exactly how they can be used. Just normal Stalkers without any upgrades at all can kite them without very much trouble. But now we do have a lot of action drop in the main of Crank. Meanwhile, the Disruptor is doing a bit of harass over on Hart's side of the map. Yeah,
Hart was able to split against that quite rapidly. He saw it coming in. He was able to engage. Nice little bit of drop harass there, but he's still behind economically. You know, he doesn't have the bases. He doesn't have the workers. His army is good enough to deflect what Crank has, and that's only because Crank's got super greedy with tech. Once the Colossi start coming out, I think things are going to become difficult for Hart, who does not have any Vikings. Whoa!
Did you see the
I saw the remnants of it. Yeah, sorry, I just missed that. But that was devastating hit. That was a lot of damage. 13 workers killed now. Big drop comes in, but the Colossus is up now, and a Zealot heavy force. This is where Hercs with arc cannons would be nice, but he doesn't have them, and he's going to end up losing this army.
Yeah, Marauders do go down. Hart's play is it's a little bit fragile here. He's making some interesting and questionable decisions, and Crank has really stabilized on 3 bases. He's got a healthy Stalker count. With the Colossus out, he can deflect this Bioforce. He won't really have to worry about kiting. And that Disruptor is just giving Crank a lot of power and he's forcing a lot of Hart's attention back home.
And Hart's got no Vikings. Like, he has no way to deflect this Warp Prism. He can't get rid of it, and he's going to keep taking damage. Even if he micros away from it, you've got another Disruptor attacking him. He doesn't move, he's going to lose half his mineral line again. And there he is. I mean, yet more gone. 20 workers killed. Devastating attacks. And I'm not really sure where Hart goes from here. He doesn't have the units.
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult for him to really make anything happen. He's trying to do a drop in the natural here, killing some probes. But the attack at the 3rd here is getting cleaned up without any trouble at all.
Yeah, I mean, you see the army supply difference. It's 84 to 44, and Hart doesn't have the tech to kill Colossus, and his opponent's about to have 3 of them. And Extended Thermal Lance is done, so where do you go from here? Are we going to see that big Herc transition again that Ryung was able to pull off, which turned out to be an effective Colossus Deathball breaker? He might pick one off at the back here, which will be nice, assuming he doesn't end up losing the units in the process. This is a good move, and he is poking at the third again, so he's doing multi-pronged harassment, which is effective, and he's managed to kill a bunch of Stalkers as well. Nice little hot pickup on the Cyclone. Lovely micro here from Hart, who is pulling himself back into this game by sheer willpower.
You can see Hart is the more active current StarCraft player, a bit higher form. You can see that coming out in his multitasking. Even though he is down, he is not out. He's willing to keep putting in everything he can, multitasking everywhere, all over the map, but I'm not sure it's going to be enough. He was so far behind, and it will probably come down to this right here. He's trying to pick off a Colossus in Crank's third.
Yeah, and he lost a bunch of Marines trying to do it, which he might be able to eke around with these Marauder drops. I would love, again, to see Herx brought into play, especially since it seems we're going to get a lot of charging Zealots out of Crank. Herx with Arc Cannon would be amazing here, but I don't think... maybe Hart doesn't have... I mean, he's on 2 bases. I guess he doesn't have the resources for the tech switch. It's a very gas-heavy tech switch, and it seems like he's just going to work with what he's comfortable with. And he's done damage to Crank. He has. He's managed to reduce the probe count significantly. He's managed to kill Colossus. He's managed to thin out the Stalker count, but he still has no answer to this down Warp Prism. I mean, he hasn't even attempted to build a missile turret. He's going to lose his mineral line again.
Yeah, big Zealot Warp in, but he's actually going to cancel it. Sees the big drop in his main, and he's got the Stalkers there to defend, but he's got to Warp in to hold on.
And we're going to see... we saw Nartosis Pylon go down. Charge could... well, I mean, it's been shut down for a while. The charge could be cancelled here. That is a big, very dangerous army from Hart, and he's able to slow a lot of that stuff down. He's playing his heart out. Sorry, I'm so sorry. But I don't think it's going to be enough. We're struggling his way back into this game, but I mean, he's up against a huge Protoss army. The Disruptor might... no! Hart! No! Loses yet more units. He moved slightly out of range, and for some reason the Hart's... oh, of course, the immunity. That's why, yeah. Wasn't able to kill it. If he'd stimmed, he might have been able to kill it in time. Yet another drop kills more Stalkers, but he is still fighting against these Zealots, and he doesn't have the Herx to really fight them, so he's losing Marauders in inefficient trades. And now we've got a big engagement in front of Crank's base, and Hart is relying on speed here. He's trying to out-multitask Crank, and he can do it, and he is making it happen, slowly but surely.
Yeah, you can definitely see Crank is... he's been on the defensive, he's taking a lot of damage, but at the same time, the Disruptor is keeping Hart's economy down. You know, the Disruptor has 41 kills.
Yeah. And, I mean, there's no missile turrets to ever ward this damn thing away. There's never any defense in place to handle it. Uh-oh, if Hart loses this to charging Zealots, that could be bad. But he takes the third, but to what cost? He's going to lose his whole army for that third base. Does that trigger Crank just to go at this point?
Yeah, I don't think Crank has much left even to defend. He doesn't really need to. He's lost... yeah.
GG.
Hart recognizes that he had the advantage there. He was able to take it. And with that Nexus, you know, he was so far behind from the beginning with that attack that didn't really do damage. And so he had to make something happen. Finally gets to the point where there's really nothing left. Like, his economy is just too wrecked by the Disruptor to keep going.
Yeah, I agree. I think there was no possible way you can ignore a Disruptor the way that Hart did. And it happened to other people as well. You know, it happened to Maya in his match against Alicia. If a Disruptor is in a Warp Prism, you need to answer that in some way. You can't just leave it lying around and hope that you can split against it, because the micro required to actually split against it is far higher than the micro required to do damage with it. So it's going to keep coming back. It's going to keep hurting you. It's not like a Widow Mine. That thing drops. Once you activate it, the thing is immune. You can't kill it. So you have to avoid it. And it seems like the only way to do that is you've got to stop it getting in your base in the first place, which means building counters to Warp Prisms rather than building counters to Disruptors. Yeah,
and definitely, just like the Widow Mine, you cannot afford to leave it alone. You know, with a Widow Mine, you can't, like, you can split and always lose one probe if you're really on top of it. But to try and do that while doing everything else when your opponent is choosing when you're going to have to make the split, it's unreasonable. A good player will force a battle that you have to pay attention to, and then they'll send the mine in or they'll send the Disruptor in, and it's kind of the same thing. If left unchecked, it just gets out of control. Too many kills, so much damage for such a small investment.
Yeah, it certainly seems to be the case. Like, it's just something that you have to answer. You can't just leave it lying around and hope for the best. And Crank used it very effectively. Alicia did too, but I think Crank's was maybe even better than that. And the amount of value you get out of just a single disruptor. You don't even need multiple disruptors, although I wouldn't say no to double disruptor drops. I think that you can, if you split those up, you can obliterate an entire mineral line immediately. And if you can do that, then you just gain a huge lead. I don't think it's unreasonable.
The main reason that most of the players are sticking to one disruptor is because if you imagine the disruptor is a Colossus, which they cost the same amount, in a normal game, it's very unlikely that the Protoss can actually commit 2 Colossus worth of units to not defense.
Yeah.
And so they get that one, and then they start Colossus production immediately so that they don't die back home. You know, what's the point of double disruptor drop? You kill all your opponent's SCVs. Oh, by the way, you lost your Nexus, your Natural, all your probes, and everything because you can't defend the Stim Bio push.
Yeah, certainly.